The attack came on a cold February morning, exactly 4 months after Juan's phone call had saved Thompson Industries from bankruptcy. Richard was reviewing quarterly reports that showed the company's remarkable turnaround when his assistant burst into his office with a tablet displaying the morning's headlines. "Corporate conman or social justice hero," read the front page of the New York Business Journal. Below it, a smaller headline delivered the devastating blow. "Thompson Industries accused of exploiting immigrant family for public relations gains." Marcus Brennan, writing under the pseudonym Mark Bradley and claiming to be an investigative journalist specializing in corporate fraud, had spent 3 months researching their story and interviewing former Thompson Industries employees who harbored resentments about the company's new direction. The piece painted Richard as a desperate CEO who had fabricated the entire Marcus Brennan fraud story to cover up his own mismanagement of company funds. According to the article, the $3 million that had supposedly been lost to Brennan's con had actually been embezzled by Richard himself to pay for personal expenses and gambling debts. When the theft was discovered by company auditors, Richard had allegedly created the elaborate Brennan story and hired Selena's family as actors to portray grateful beneficiaries of his newfound social consciousness. The article described Juan as a coached child performer whose supposedly spontaneous phone call had been carefully scripted by Richard and Selena working together. It claimed that Selena was not actually a cleaning lady, but a professional con artist who had been working with Richard for years to defraud investors and manipulate media coverage. The community program, according to the piece, was nothing more than an expensive public relations stunt designed to distract from Thompson Industries' ongoing financial problems and Richard's personal legal troubles. Most devastatingly, the article included quotes from several Thompson Industries employees who corroborated parts of the story. These weren't random disgruntled workers, but people with access to inside information, people who knew enough details about the company's operations to make their accusations sound credible. The quotes painted Selena as an ambitious manipulator who had seduced Richard into hiring her for a position she wasn't qualified for, and Juan as a precocious but troubled child who had been taught to lie to adults to get what his family wanted. The article also included financial documents that appeared to show irregular transfers from Thompson Industries accounts to offshore companies controlled by Richard personally. These documents looked authentic enough to fool casual observers, complete with bank letterheads and transaction numbers that could be verified through normal channels. To anyone who didn't know the true story, the evidence appeared overwhelming and damning. Within hours of the article's publication, the story had been picked up by national news networks, business cable channels, and social media influencers who specialized in exposing corporate corruption. The hashtag #JoshThompsonFraud was trending on Twitter, with thousands of users expressing outrage about wealthy executives manipulating immigrant families for personal gain. Several prominent politicians called for federal investigations into Thompson Industries' business practices and the authenticity of their community programs. The timing of the attack was perfectly calculated to maximize damage. It came just 2 weeks before Thompson Industries was scheduled to close on a major refinancing deal that would completely resolve the company's remaining financial problems from the original Meridian Corporation disaster. The new allegations made the banks nervous about their exposure to potential legal liabilities and reputational damage from being associated with a company accused of fraud. More immediately, the story threatened to destroy Selena's reputation and Juan's emotional well-being in ways that went far beyond financial concerns. Parents at Juan's private school were already whispering about whether the boy's presence there was based on legitimate merit or elaborate deception. Selena's colleagues at Thompson Industries, many of whom had never fully accepted her rapid promotion, were openly questioning whether she had manipulated her way into her position through false pretenses. But the cruelest aspect of Brennan's revenge was how it weaponized the very real class and cultural tensions that Richard, Selena, and Juan had been working so hard to overcome. The article played into existing stereotypes about immigrants as con artists, wealthy executives as corrupt predators, and cross-cultural partnerships as inherently exploitative. It took the genuine trust and affection that had developed between 3 very different people and reframed it as evidence of manipulation and fraud. Richard's first instinct was to fight back with the full resources of Thompson Industries' legal and public relations teams. He wanted to hire private investigators to expose Marcus Brennan's true identity, to sue the publication for libel, to flood the media with documentation proving that every allegation in the article was false. It was exactly the kind of aggressive corporate response that had made him successful in business for decades. The instinct to overwhelm opposition with superior resources and relentless pressure. But Selena stopped him before he could make the calls that would have turned their situation from a crisis into a war. She understood something that Richard, for all his business acumen, had never learned. That sometimes the most powerful response to an attack is not to fight back, but to demonstrate through actions that the attack is based on fundamental misunderstandings about who you really are. If we respond to lies with anger and lawyers and more media attention, Selena explained during an emergency meeting in Richard's office, we're accepting their premise that this is about public relations and corporate image management. We're letting them turn our real relationship into a fake story about fake people. Instead, we should respond by being more authentic than ever, by doing the work we believe in so well that anyone who meets us will know the truth. But the people who do know us, the people we've actually helped, they know the truth. Maybe instead of trying to convince strangers that we're good people, we should ask our friends to tell their stories. Instead of hiring expensive crisis management consultants and launching a coordinated media campaign, they decided to let the people whose lives had been touched by the community program speak for themselves. They would document the real impact of their work through the voices of families, children, and communities that had benefited from Thompson Industries' new approach to corporate social responsibility. Over the next 2 weeks, something remarkable happened. Parents whose children had been accepted into the scholarship program began sharing their stories on social media, describing in detail their interactions with Selena and Juan, and explaining how the program had changed their families' lives. Teachers from the schools that had partnered with Thompson Industries wrote letters to newspapers describing Selena's genuine commitment to educational equity and Juan's natural ability to connect with children from diverse backgrounds. Most powerfully, other business executives who had been inspired by Thompson Industries' example began speaking out about their own efforts to learn from employees and communities they had previously ignored. These weren't people with any financial stake in defending Richard or Selena, but leaders who recognized that the attack on Thompson Industries was really an attack on the possibility that genuine cross-cultural partnerships could create positive change in corporate America. The grassroots response revealed something that Marcus Brennan had not anticipated when he crafted his revenge scheme. The story of Richard, Selena, and Juan had resonated with people not because it was a clever public relations strategy, but because it represented something that millions of Americans desperately wanted to believe was possible. That differences in background and experience could be sources of strength rather than division. That economic success could be achieved through cooperation rather than exploitation. That wisdom could be found in unexpected places if people were humble enough to listen. As the authentic testimonials accumulated, the credibility of Brennan's accusations began to crumble. Investigative journalists who specialized in verifying financial documents discovered that the supposedly incriminating bank records had been expertly forged using a combination of legitimate transaction templates and fabricated data. The employees, who had been quoted attacking Selena and Richard, were revealed to be either completely fictional or real people whose words had been taken out of context and distorted beyond recognition. Most damaging to Brennan's credibility, several news organizations began investigating the true identity of Mark Bradley and discovered his connection to the original investment fraud that had nearly destroyed Thompson Industries. When Brennan's real history and motivations were exposed, the entire narrative of his article collapsed, revealing it as an elaborate attempt at revenge rather than legitimate journalism. But the real vindication came from an unexpected source: the Federal Bureau of Investigation's White-Collar Crime Unit, which had been tracking Marcus Brennan's activities across multiple states and countries. The publicity generated by his attack on Thompson Industries had inadvertently helped federal agents locate Brennan and gather evidence of his extensive criminal enterprises. When he was arrested at his Miami apartment, investigators discovered detailed plans not only for destroying Richard's reputation, but for similar revenge schemes targeting other business executives who had escaped his previous fraud attempts. The arrest and subsequent investigation revealed the true scope of Brennan's criminal activities, which extended far beyond the investment fraud he had attempted against Thompson Industries. Over a period of 8 years, he had stolen over $400 million from businesses and individuals across 12 countries, destroying hundreds of jobs and devastating multiple communities. The investigation also revealed that his attack on Richard, Selena, and Juan was part of a larger pattern of targeting successful partnerships between people from different economic and cultural backgrounds, exploiting social tensions and stereotypes to maximum destructive effect. When the truth about Marcus Brennan and his motivations became public, the media narrative around Thompson Industries shifted dramatically. Instead of being seen as potential victims of a manipulative immigrant family, Richard, Selena, and Juan were recognized as the targets of an elaborate revenge scheme by an international con artist who had been using cultural prejudices and class resentments as weapons against his victims. But more importantly, the crisis had strengthened rather than weakened the bonds between the three people whose lives had been intertwined by a wrong number 4 months earlier. They had learned that they could trust each other, not just during good times, but during the darkest moments when everything they had built together was under attack. They had discovered that their partnership was strong enough to survive attempts to destroy it from the outside and resilient enough to grow stronger under pressure. The experience also taught them valuable lessons about the nature of change and the resistance it provokes. Their success in bridging economic and cultural divides had threatened people who benefited from maintaining those divisions. Their demonstration that cooperation could be more profitable than exploitation had challenged fundamental assumptions about how business and society should operate. The attacks they had endured were not random acts of malice, but predictable responses to their challenge to existing power structures. As spring arrived, Thompson Industries completed the refinancing deal that secured the company's financial future for decades to come. The community program had expanded to serve over 200 families and had inspired similar initiatives at dozens of other companies. Selena had been promoted to Vice President of Community Relations, a position that utilized her unique combination of grassroots wisdom and executive experience. Juan had not only thrived academically, but had become a bridge between different communities within his school, helping other scholarship students navigate the social complexities of elite educational environments. But perhaps the most significant change was in Richard himself. The man who had once measured success purely in terms of financial metrics and corporate achievements had learned to value different kinds of wealth. The richness that comes from genuine relationships across cultural and economic boundaries, the satisfaction of creating opportunities for others to succeed, the peace that comes from knowing that your work makes the world more just and equitable, rather than simply more profitable. The transformation was evident in every aspect of how Thompson Industries operated. The company's hiring practices prioritized diversity not as a legal requirement or public relations gesture, but as a competitive advantage that brought together different perspectives and experiences to solve complex problems. The community program had evolved from a charitable initiative into an integral part of the company's business strategy, providing insights into consumer needs and market opportunities that traditional research methods had missed. Most importantly, the culture of the company had shifted from one that valued individual achievement above all else to one that recognized that the greatest successes come from collaborative efforts that benefit everyone involved. Employees at every level were encouraged to share their insights and experiences, regardless of their formal education or economic background. The executive team included people who had started as janitors, security guards, and administrative assistants, bringing perspectives that challenged assumptions and identified blind spots that had previously limited the company's growth. The changes at Thompson Industries began to attract attention from business schools, government agencies, and international organizations studying effective approaches to economic development and social inclusion. Richard found himself invited to speak at conferences around the world, sharing the story of how a wrong number had led to a complete transformation of his understanding of leadership and success. But he never spoke alone at these events. Selena and Juan always accompanied him, because their story could not be told authentically without all three perspectives represented. Their presentations were unlike typical corporate speeches, combining Richard's executive insights with Selena's community wisdom and Juan's observations about bridging different worlds. Audiences consistently rated their joint presentations as more informative and inspiring than any individual speaker they had heard. Juan, now 8 years old and thriving in his academic and social development, had become something of a phenomenon in educational circles. His ability to connect with people from vastly different backgrounds and his natural talent for identifying the underlying motivations behind surface behaviors made him an invaluable contributor to discussions about childhood development, educational equity, and cross-cultural communication. But Juan remained fundamentally the same gentle, curious, intuitive child who had accidentally dialed Richard's phone number on that October morning. His experiences with private school, media attention, and corporate boardrooms had not made him arrogant or entitled, but had deepened his appreciation for the simple values his mother had taught him, treating all people with respect, helping others when possible, and never losing sight of what really matters in life. Selena's journey had been perhaps the most remarkable of all. In less than a year, she had gone from invisible cleaning lady to nationally recognized expert on corporate social responsibility and community engagement. Universities offered her honorary degrees, foundations invited her to join their boards, and politicians sought her advice on policies affecting immigrant families and working-class communities. Yet she remained grounded in the practical wisdom that had made her valuable to Richard in the first place. She never forgot what it felt like to choose between paying rent and buying groceries, to work multiple jobs while raising a child alone, to be dismissed and underestimated because of her accent and education level. These experiences informed every decision she made in her new role, ensuring that Thompson Industries' community programs served real needs rather than corporate image requirements. As the first anniversary of Juan's phone call approached, Richard reflected on how completely his life had changed. A year earlier, he had been a desperate man on the verge of losing everything he had worked to build, saved only by the accidental intervention of a child he had never met. Now he was the head of a thriving company that had become a model for socially responsible business practices, in partnership with people who had become not just colleagues, but genuine friends. The financial success had been remarkable. Thompson Industries' revenue had increased by 40% over the year, driven by contracts from clients who wanted to work with a company known for its ethical practices and innovative approaches to community engagement. The company's stock price had tripled, making Richard personally wealthier than ever before. But more importantly, the wealth was being shared more equitably among employees at all levels, and a significant portion of profits was being invested in community development initiatives that created opportunities for others to escape poverty and build better lives for their families. The anniversary celebration was held not in a fancy corporate event space, but in the community center in Queens, where Juan attended after-school programs. The guest list included Thompson Industries employees, scholarship recipients and their families, community leaders, and business executives from around the country who had implemented similar programs in their own companies. The evening began with presentations from children in the scholarship program, who shared artwork, essays, and performances that demonstrated how educational opportunities had changed their perspectives and expanded their dreams. Parents spoke about the practical impact of the program on their families, describing how stable housing, healthcare benefits, and educational support had allowed them to focus on long-term goals rather than daily survival. But the most moving moment came when Juan took the microphone to speak about the past year. Standing in front of an audience that included some of the most powerful people in corporate America, the 8-year-old spoke with the same simple honesty that had first impressed Richard during their accidental phone conversation. "A year ago, I was scared and sick and trying to call my mama," Juan began. "I dialed the wrong number and started talking to Mr. Richard, who was also scared but for different reasons. We helped each other that day, but we didn't know it yet. What I learned this year is that helping each other isn't something special that happened once. It's something we can choose to do every day, with everyone we meet, if we remember that everyone has something valuable to offer, and everyone deserves to be treated with respect. It was a story about the simple but revolutionary idea that everyone has wisdom to offer, and everyone deserves opportunities to succeed, regardless of their background or circumstances. Richard realized that the phone call that had saved his company had actually saved something much more important: his understanding of what success really meant and what kind of person he wanted to be. The wealth and corporate achievements that had once defined his identity now seemed like tools to be used in service of larger purposes, rather than ends in themselves. Selena understood that her journey from cleaning lady to corporate executive was not just a personal success story, but a demonstration that the barriers between different economic and social classes were more artificial than real. Her experiences in corporate boardrooms had not made her forget her roots, but had given her platforms to advocate for policies and practices that could create opportunities for other working families to achieve economic stability and social mobility. For Juan, the year had been an adventure that most children could barely imagine, but it had not changed his essential nature. He remained curious, compassionate, and wise in ways that continued to surprise adults. His experiences in elite schools and corporate settings had taught him about different ways of living and thinking, but they had also reinforced his appreciation for the values his mother had instilled in him from birth. As the celebration continued into the evening, with people from vastly different backgrounds sharing food, stories, and laughter, Richard understood that they had created something genuinely revolutionary. Not through grand gestures or dramatic confrontations with existing power structures, but through the simple act of taking each other seriously as human beings with valuable perspectives and legitimate needs. The community that had formed around Thompson Industries programs was proof that economic inequality and cultural misunderstanding were not inevitable features of American society, but problems that could be solved through genuine partnership and mutual respect. The success of their efforts had inspired similar initiatives across the country and around the world, demonstrating that individual acts of cooperation could scale into social movements with the power to transform entire communities. But perhaps the most important lesson of the past year was that change begins with individual relationships between specific people who choose to see past surface differences, to recognize shared humanity and common interests. Richard's transformation from isolated executive to community partner had started with his decision to take seriously the concerns of a scared child. Selena's journey from invisible worker to recognized leader had started with her willingness to trust a powerful man who seemed to genuinely value her insights. As the anniversary celebration wound down and people began to head home to communities across New York City, Richard, Selena, and Juan stood together in the community center where it all began, looking back on a year that had exceeded their wildest expectations and forward to possibilities they were still discovering. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Juan had dialed the right number that morning? Richard asked as they prepared to leave. Selena smiled as she watched Juan carefully stacking chairs to help the janitor clean up after the event. "I think maybe there was no wrong number," she said. "I think maybe Juan called exactly who he was supposed to call, exactly when he was supposed to call, so that all of us could become who we were meant to be." The phone call that had seemed like a mistake had actually been the beginning of something perfect. A demonstration that the American dream could be real for everyone, when people were willing to share their resources, wisdom, and opportunities with others. The wrong number had led to the right story, the right partnerships, and the right understanding of what it truly means to be successful. And as they walked out into the New York night, Richard, Selena, and Juan knew that their story was just beginning, because they had learned the most important lesson of all: that real success is not about what you achieve for yourself, but about what you make possible for others, and that the greatest wealth is not measured in dollars, but in the richness of the relationships you build and the positive impact you create in the world. The phone call that changed everything had taught them that everyone has something valuable to offer. Everyone deserves opportunities to succeed, and everyone benefits when we choose to help each other. instead of competing against each other. It was a simple lesson, but one with the power to transform not just individual lives, but entire societies. One relationship, one conversation, one act of generosity at a time. And in a world that often seems divided by differences in wealth, education, culture, and opportunity, their story offered something precious and necessary. Proof that those differences can be sources of strength rather than conflict, and that the future belongs to those who are brave enough to build bridges instead of walls, wise enough to listen to voices they have never heard before, and generous enough to share their success with others who are still fighting for their chance to thrive. If you enjoyed this incredible story of how a wrong number changed 3 lives forever, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for more inspiring stories that will restore your faith in the power of human kindness and the possibility of positive change. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that miracles can happen when we choose to help each other instead of competing against each other, and that sometimes the most powerful changes in our lives come from the most unexpected places.